All right, let's dive into a really powerful fable today. It's one that explores a totally different kind of leadership, one that comes from wisdom instead of just force. This is the story of the wise king and the river's mercy.
So get this. You're in the middle of a devastating drought. Your survival is literally on the line, and your leader's big plan is to sing? I mean, it sounds completely absurd, right? But that single command is the key to this entire story. So what on earth was this king thinking?
Okay, so our story is set in the heart of Karnataka, in the thriving kingdom of Vijayanagara. This whole place was basically defined by its relationship with one powerful force of nature, the great Tungabhadra River. Now, leading this kingdom was a man named King Veera, and the thing is, his people respected him, but not because he conquered lands or won a bunch of battles. Nope. His reputation was built on something way more lasting, his deep wisdom and a real sense of justice, which let his people live well and in peace.
But you know how these stories go. Even the most peaceful kingdoms have to face trials, and a huge crisis was looming on the horizon, one that was going to threaten the very foundation of their lives and really put their king's wisdom to the test.
It all started with a simple, terrifying fact. The life-giving monsoon rains, the very pulse of the entire region, they just failed to show up.
And the effect of that was immediate and honestly catastrophic. The Tungabhadra River, which wasn't just a body of water, it was the kingdom's absolute lifeline, it started to shrink. Its powerful flow just slowed to a trickle. You can just imagine the panic spreading like wildfire across the kingdom. Farmers who depended on that river were just gripped with worry. In the city, the wells started to run dry, bringing the crisis to everyone's doorstep. And yeah, even in the palace, the king's ministers were getting deeply anxious. They could sense a disaster coming.
So faced with this crisis, two very different ways of thinking emerged. Two completely different paths forward. The kingdom had to make a choice. Do we solve this with force, or do we try to solve it with understanding?
Of course, the young, action-oriented princes and ministers were the first to speak up. They saw a problem and they demanded a physical solution, right now. Their intentions were good, for sure, but their approach was pretty conventional.
And this really shows you the split perfectly. On one side, you've got the advisor's plan. It's all about brute force. Dig a deeper canal to take what little water is left. Or, even more extreme, divert a river from a neighboring kingdom, which, let's be real, would almost certainly lead to war. They saw the river as an object, something to be controlled. But on the other side, you've got the king's approach. It might seem passive, but it's profoundly different. Listen, understand, and act with respect.
And here it is, the absolute heart of the matter, in the king's own words. He tells his council, "The river is not our enemy. It is our tired friend. We must not force it, but understand it." Wow. With that one statement, he completely reframes the entire problem. This isn't a battle to be won. It's a relationship that needs to be healed.
So, after rejecting all the plans of aggression, what was King Veera's big idea? Well, he issued an order that must have just stunned his court, a plan that was rooted not in aggression, but in gratitude.
His royal decree had just 3 simple steps. First, he told his people to leave their tools, their shovels and their axes behind. Instead, they were to bring flowers and offerings to the riverbank. Second, instead of digging, they were to sing songs of gratitude, remembering how the river had taken care of them for generations. And third, and this is the kicker, he wasn't going to watch from his throne. The king himself would walk among the people, not as a commander, but as a humble elder.
The fable never actually tells us if the rains came the next day. And that's because the immediate result, that's not the point. The point is the profound lesson that's embedded in the king's actions, a lesson about what true leadership really is.
So what does all this mean for us? Well, the fable teaches us that wisdom can be way more powerful than brute force, that real leadership isn't just about giving orders, it's about empathy and having a deep understanding. It reminds us that our relationship with nature isn't about domination, it's about mutual respect, something that's essential for our own survival. And maybe most importantly, it shows that expressing gratitude isn't some passive thing. It can be a powerful, unifying, and transformative action.
Which brings us to our final question. We all face our own droughts today, right? They might be environmental, social, or even personal. When we're confronted with these huge challenges, do we automatically reach for the shovel and the axe first? Or is there some wisdom in the king's approach to just pause, to try and understand, and to act with gratitude and respect? What is the lesson of this story for us right now?